On a night when Victoria Island looked like it was dipped in gold and promise, the doors of the fanciest restaurant in Lagos opened and a man stepped out who could buy and sell the whole street without blinking. If you've ever wondered what happens when a sheik throws $5 million on the table, just for the thrill of being served in Arabic, you're about to see a night that Lagos won't forget. People say money talks, but tonight it's about to start a shouting match. And it all began the moment Sheikh Khalid Al-Fahim arrived, making the chandeliers look cheap with the shine of his entrance. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us in the comments where you are following us from. Traffic was still humming outside, khaki horns playing their usual evening chorus, but inside everything was different. The air was thick with the scent of spicy jollof and sweet imported wine. Waiters moved fast, dodging customers who wore their best lace and gold, hoping to catch the eye of Lagos's elite. But nothing prepared the staff for this visitor. Sheikh Khalid didn't just walk in. He glided, robes spotless, rings on every finger, his voice low but commanding. There was a hush, that kind of silence that feels like the room itself is holding its breath. From his first step, you could tell this was not a man who came to blend in. Even Damilola, the sharp-eyed manager who'd worked here 5 years and seen ministers, movie stars, oil barons, you name it, froze at the sight of him. She scanned the room for her best staff. Amara Ease was quietly folding napkins in the corner, her head half lost in a daydream, her hands as quick and careful as ever. She didn't know yet, but tonight would drag her into a game no one ever expected to play. As the sheik moved towards his table, guests leaned in, murmuring stories, some true, some grown wild in the retelling, about the Arabian billionaire who bought up half of Echo Atlantic, the man who dined with presidents, the mysterious stranger with money to burn and secrets to keep. Baba Ojo, the bartender, watched all of it through the mirror behind his gin bottles, shaking his head like he'd seen too much of this world to be surprised. But even he knew tonight was about to test the limits of what money could buy in Lagos and what pride could cost. And so the night began, with everyone watching, waiting to see what would happen when a sheik offered $5 million for something no one expected, and when Lagos, as usual, decided not to play by his rules. From the moment Sheikh Khalid settled into his seat, center table, under the biggest chandelier like he owned the moon, everyone felt the shift in the room. The waiters whispered to each other, trying to guess his order, but only Damilola, ever the hawk, dared to approach first. She bowed her head, lips pressed tight into a professional smile. "Welcome, sir. Would you like to see the menu?" she asked, already nervous, but the sheik hardly spared her a glance. His gaze swept the room, calculating, almost bored, as if waiting for a show that hadn't started yet. Without even looking up, he waved a hand. "Bring me your most capable server," he said, and there was something in his tone, like a challenge hidden beneath the silk. Damilola's eyes darted over to Amara, who was just finishing up at a table by the window, her tray balanced with the ease of years on her feet. She'd grown used to Lagos's big egos, but this was different. She could feel the weight of every eye on her as Damilola beckoned her over. Amara squared her shoulders, took a breath, and walked up to the sheik, her apron crisp and nerves steeled by the quiet pride her mother taught her long ago. "Good evening, sir. My name is Amara. May I take your order?" The sheik looked her up and down, slowly, deliberately. "Amara?" he repeated, drawing out the syllables like he was trying to find the meaning beneath them. He took a long pause, and with the whole restaurant leaning in, he smiled, but it was the kind of smile you see on men who never lose. "I have a game for you," he said, his voice smooth but sharp as a razor. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim black wallet, flicking it open to reveal a thick stack of dollars. Not naira, not euros, dollars. "If you can serve me in Arabic, perfect Arabic, mind you, I will pay you $5 million, right here, right now. But if you fail, well, you'll serve my table all night for free." A hush dropped over the restaurant, so heavy you could almost hear the ceiling fans creak. Baba Ojo, who had been rinsing glasses at the bar, set his sponge down, watching with that old man's knowing look, as if he'd seen Lagos swallow the pride of bigger men. Chica, waiting outside in the car park, sensed something wrong and texted Amara, but her phone was deep in her apron, unreachable now. Amara felt a heat rise in her cheeks. Was this some kind of joke? She'd heard stories of rich men making sport of staff before, but never like this, never so brazen. She met Khalid's gaze, her voice steady, her back straight. "Is that all?" she asked, not blinking. The Sheik's smile widened. "Is that all? If you win, you get the money, no questions. If you lose, you owe me your time. Simple as that." "What do you say, Amara?" She could see her colleagues out of the corner of her eye, some rooting for her, some worried she'd embarrass the place. Damilola whispered encouragement from the shadows, fingers crossed behind her back. The whole room was silent, hanging on her answer. Amara took a deep breath, hearing her mother's voice in her mind. "Don't let anybody tell you what you're worth. Show them." So she nodded once. "I accept." Khalid clapped his hands together softly, the rings on his fingers catching the light. "Then let's begin." He rattled off an order in rapid-fire Arabic, the words smooth and precise. For a split second, Amara's mind raced, pulling up every memory, every phrase her mother drilled into her as a child. She answered just as smooth, matching his dialect, her voice steady. The Sheik raised an eyebrow, surprised, but he didn't let it show for long. "Not bad," he said, and waved for her to continue. Amara navigated his requests. Tea, appetizers, a rare dish he claimed only real Arabs would know about, flawlessly. With each exchange, more people leaned in to listen, some recording discreetly, others just watching with wide eyes. Baba Ojo smirked at the bar, pouring himself a shot he'd never admit to, while Damilola wrung her hands behind the hostess stand. Amara's heart beat like a talking drum in her chest, but she never let it show. Khalid pushed harder, switching from Arabic to French without warning. Amara didn't even blink. She answered in perfect French, her accent Parisian, not Cotonou. Now people started to murmur for real. Khalid, ever the showman, went for Mandarin next. Amara responded in the same measured melodic tones, the restaurant staff's jaws dropping one by one. She glanced at her brother's message lighting up her phone, but she stayed focused, determined not to let Lagos down. The Sheik leaned back, folding his arms, watching her as if seeing her for the first time. The wager had become more than a game. Pride was now in the room, his and hers, and somehow all of Lagos too. "Impressive," he said, and this time it sounded genuine. "But do you know Italian?" He switched fast, testing her limits. Amara fired back, unruffled. "Would you like your pasta al dente or softer, sir?" The room burst out laughing, tension melting away for a second. Baba Ojo raised his glass in salute, the old bartender's grin stretching ear to ear. Khalid sat silent for a long moment, lips pressed thin, his eyes flickering with something new, respect maybe, or the first hint of fear that he might lose. Amara just stood her ground, her chin high, refusing to be rattled. It was then Khalid shifted tactics. "Who taught you?" he asked quietly. And for a heartbeat, it was just the two of them, the whole city waiting for her answer. Amara smiled, her eyes far away for a second. "My mother. She wanted me to see the world, even from Lagos." Khalid nodded slowly, and something in his expression softened, just a crack. Around them, the restaurant exhaled. Waiters started whispering bets. Some guests cheered for Amara, others, drawn by the promise of money, rooted for Khalid. The wager had become the main event, and there was no turning back. Khalid, sensing the tide, lifted his glass and toasted, not just to Amara, but to every dreamer in the room. And with that, the game continued. The stakes now bigger than money, bigger than pride. The night was just getting started. From the moment Amara met Khalid's eyes across the table, the whole room seemed to shrink, as if the world had boiled down to just the two of them. The waiters who had been whispering now paused, holding their breath. The other guests, Senators' wives, oilmen, musicians from Victoria Island leaned forward in their seats. Even Damilola, who'd always insisted on keeping the floor moving, let her clipboard slip to her side. Amara could feel the weight of expectation settle on her shoulders, but she kept her gaze level, refusing to give Khalid the satisfaction of seeing her nervous. Khalid stared at her for a long, quiet moment, his eyes cold and sharp, searching for any crack in her armor. He smiled again, but this time it was smaller, a private thing, as if he'd found something interesting inside her. "You surprise me, Amara," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Most people see money and lose their heads. You—" He trailed off, as if testing her reaction, but Amara held steady, not letting her lips twitch, not giving him an inch. She simply nodded and asked if he was ready for his starter. Baba Ojo, watching from the bar, caught her eye in the mirror and gave a single nod. No words, just that subtle encouragement old Lagos men are masters at. Khalid placed his order for the starter, but instead of describing the dish in English or Arabic, he switched suddenly to Russian, voice clipped, almost daring her to keep up. For a second there was a beat of silence, a single second where it looked like Amara might stumble. But she reached for a memory, her mother muttering in Russian while braiding her hair during a blackout, using foreign words to fill the dark. Amara repeated his order in Russian, her accent rough around the edges but sure, and Khalid's eyes flashed with something like delight. "Where did you learn all that?" he asked, his tone lighter now, less arrogant, almost curious. Amara shrugged, her answer as simple as the truth. "Life in Lagos teaches you plenty, if you're listening." The Sheik leaned forward, elbows on the table, all his earlier bravado melted away for a heartbeat. He was suddenly less a billionaire and more a man hungry for something he couldn't buy. In the background, the restaurant buzzed with a new kind of excitement. Guests began whispering about Amara, some calling her a prodigy, others wondering what secrets she might have. Chica, pacing outside, finally slipped in through the back door, peering through the kitchen into the dining room, his heart pounding with protective big brother energy. Damilola, sensing the shift in the room, quickly told her staff to keep the food hot and the wine flowing. She wouldn't let the night lose its magic, not now. Khalid's bodyguards sat at a side table, watching everything with blank faces, hands folded neatly in their laps. But Amara noticed one of them suppress a grin when she spoke Mandarin to a guest at the next table. Even they were impressed. Khalid, though, was wrestling with his pride. Every question he threw at Amara, every twist of language, she caught and answered without pause. The more he pressed, the more she rose to the challenge. When he finally switched back to Arabic and ordered another round of appetizers, Amara delivered the order with a flourish, making sure her hands didn't shake. The whole restaurant erupted in applause, someone even banging on a table for emphasis. For a moment, the game paused. Khalid looked at Amara, really looked at her, as if he was trying to see past her uniform, her steady hands, her practiced smile. "You know, back in Abu Dhabi, my mother used to tell me never to underestimate a woman who can hold her own at the table," he said, voice softer now. "I think she'd like you." Amara blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected compliment. She couldn't help but smile, just a little. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. Baba Ojo poured a drink for himself, then one for Chica, who had finally made his way to the bar, his eyes never leaving his sister. As the evening wore on, Amara and Khalid traded stories between courses, small ones hidden in the gaps between languages. He told her about desert nights in Riyadh, the scent of cardamom on the wind, the first time he tasted Lagos street food, and how it burned his mouth but made him feel alive. Amara listened, but she didn't give away too much. Lagos had taught her that the city only gives up its secrets when it wants to, and never to the highest bidder. With every new dish, every word exchanged, the boundaries between host and guest, challenger and challenged, began to blur. Damilola, still busy but now smiling, watched as her staff and customers became a family for one night, all united by the drama at the center table. Even the kitchen staff crowded at the pass to steal glances, marveling at the woman who seemed to know no fear. By the time dessert was served, it felt less like a wager and more like a strange, wonderful dance. Khalid studied Amara's face as she poured his coffee, the lines of tension finally softening around his mouth. "If the world had more people like you, maybe money wouldn't matter so much," he said quietly. Amara met his gaze, steady and sure, her pride unspoken but shining clear. Around them, Lagos buzzed on, night pressing against the windows. But inside that restaurant, nothing else mattered except the thrill of the unknown and the promise of one more impossible challenge. The room had taken on the mood of a late-night radio show. Soft lights, voices buzzing, laughter bouncing off the crystal, and the air heavy with the smell of peppered beef and new money. Amara carried herself with the grace of someone born for the spotlight, though she had spent her whole life in the shadows of Lagos. Standing by Khalid's table, she barely noticed her own hands as she wiped the last bead of sweat from her brow. All eyes were fixed on her, some willing her to win, some waiting for her to fail, all sensing that something remarkable was unfolding right before them. When she opened her mouth to speak, the restaurant seemed to lean in, even the lights looking down, hoping to catch the first sound. Amara's greeting rolled out in flawless Arabic, rich and warm, the vowels lingering on her tongue like honey. She asked, after Khalid's comfort, his journey, his family, weaving in a blessing the way her mother had taught her as a girl, the blessing that always made strangers feel at home, even in the middle of Lagos. For a moment, the Sheik stared at her like he was seeing a ghost, a flicker of something almost vulnerable flashing across his face. He recovered quickly, but the room caught the change. Some guests sat up straighter, hungry for the next twist. Khalid answered in Arabic, faster this time, testing her ear, his accent rougher than before, as if he were pushing her to stumble. Amara kept pace, switching her dialect as naturally as changing the tempo of a high-life tune. She described the menu, recommended a spicy fish dish, and even shared a Lagos proverb in Arabic, earning a few gasps from the corner table. She was not just meeting his challenge, she was making it her own. Damilola stood by the bar, hands clasped so tight, her knuckles turned white, afraid to breathe too loud and break the magic. Chika moved in slow circles between the kitchen and the dining room, his heart pounding with equal parts worry and pride. Baba Oko, never one to waste a chance for wisdom, mumbled under his breath, "This Lagos girl, they show us something tonight, I swear." As Amara poured tea for Khalid, he switched again, now to French, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. Without missing a beat, she offered him a selection of desserts in French, listing each one with the poise of a Parisian maître d'. Khalid tried to trip her up with a joke about Nigerian suya in French slang, but Amara tossed it back with a smile, her answer so quick and effortless that the tables nearest her burst into laughter. She was winning over the crowd, and even the waiters who had doubted her before now found themselves rooting for her. Baba Ojo, watching it all, winked at her when she glanced his way. The kitchen had all but stopped working, the staff clustered at the service window, eyes wide, mouthing silent prayers and shouts of encouragement. Then Khalid switched to Mandarin. There was a beat of tension, like the pause before thunder. Most people would have hesitated, but Amara simply smiled and replied, her Mandarin precise and clear, making the bodyguards at the next table turn their heads in surprise. She described the restaurant's famous fish stew, dropping in a phrase about the taste of home that made Khalid actually laugh, a real surprise laugh, not the one he wore as armor. Around the room, the energy had changed again. People started whispering, betting money and drinks on whether she could keep up. Damilola slipped into the office and called the kitchen staff to double the portions, sure that every table would want to stay for the show. But Khalid wasn't finished. He leaned in, eyes narrowed, and fired off a question in Italian. voice sharp, a final test to see if Amara's talent would crack under pressure. She looked him straight in the eye and, without a hint of hesitation, replied in perfect Italian, recommending a wine from the house list and asking if he preferred his pasta with or without cheese. The restaurant burst into applause. Even Khalid's own security couldn't hide their smiles now. The sound of hands clapping, glasses knocking, and chairs scraping filled the room, as if the entire city had decided to celebrate Amara's victory at once. Khalid, still seated, let out a long sigh. But there was respect in his eyes now, a quiet recognition of something he couldn't buy. He raised his cup to her, and she accepted his silent toast with a nod. Amara didn't feel triumphant, just grateful for a chance to prove what her mother had always said. "You're as big as your courage, my daughter. Never let the world measure you small." The guests leaned in to hear every word, even those who hadn't understood a single phrase in Arabic, French, Mandarin, or Italian. What mattered was the way Amara spoke, confident, calm, certain in her skin and her city. Damilola finally let herself smile, her whole body relaxing as she realized this was a night their restaurant would never forget. Outside, Lagos traffic rolled on, horns blaring, life moving fast as always. But inside those walls, the only language that mattered was the one spoken by courage, respect, and the joy of a challenge answered. The applause still echoed in Amara's ears, but her heart beat with a different kind of rhythm, a secret song, one older and deeper than the cheers filling the restaurant. For a moment, as Khalid raised his cup, she drifted back to a different world, her mind slipping out of the candlelit luxury and into the humid, crowded flat in Surulere where her story had begun. She remembered her mother's voice, gentle but fierce, the way she'd press Amara's small hands between her own and whisper, "You have the gift. You must never waste it." In that cramped apartment, the walls paper thin and the lights flickering more often than not, words were currency and stories were a meal. Her mother, Ngozi, could speak like the market women in Balogun, the traders from Cotonou, even the expats from London or Beirut who came to buy pepper and fabrics. She taught Amara language the way some mothers teach prayers, each phrase an act of hope, a way to open doors where none seemed to exist. Amara's earliest memory was of her mother sitting cross-legged on their thin mattress, braiding her hair as the city raged outside. On nights when Nepa took the light and the whole block fell silent except for the cries of mosquitoes, Ngozi would light a candle and teach her daughter new words. Sometimes it was French, soft and slippery, sometimes Arabic, guttural and strong, sometimes Russian, which felt like chewing gravel but made Amara laugh. Her mother turned it into a game. If Amara could guess the meaning of a word, she'd earn an extra spoon of stew or a story before bed. Their neighbors thought Ngozi was wasting her time, filling the child's head with foreign dreams, but she shrugged them off. "We don't know where God will take us, my child," she'd say, "so you must be ready to greet the world wherever you meet it." The flashbacks came in quick bursts as Amara moved around Khalid's table, her body working on autopilot while her mind traced the lines of memory. She saw herself as a girl, translating for a lost Lebanese man in the market, earning a handful of coins and a pat on the head. She remembered her mother fighting tears as she scrubbed floors for a living, all the while drilling Amara with phrases in every language she could remember from her own childhood in Onitsha. Those lessons became their secret code, a shield against the world's harshness, a reminder that no matter how little they had, they possessed something no one could ever take. In school, Amara kept her gift quiet. She watched as classmates struggled with English, stumbling over irregular verbs while she corrected their tenses under her breath. At home, Ngozi made her read aloud from dog-eared books in French and Arabic, even bribing the local imam for old language textbooks. They didn't have money for tutors, but Amara soaked up every scrap of knowledge her mother managed to find. She learned to listen more than she spoke, to watch how people moved their hands or tilted their heads when they wanted to be understood. She practiced mimicry until her tongue bent around unfamiliar words, until even her dreams became a jumble of languages. The memory that pressed closest tonight as she moved around Khalid's table and felt the pressure of every gaze, was from years ago, after her mother fell ill. Amara was only 16, hustling at the market to pay for medicine, translating for whoever would offer a few notes. On the night Nuozi died, Amara promised her, "I will never let your gift go to waste. I'll make you proud." That promise became the stone in her pocket, the thing that weighed her down and lifted her up all at once. She chased work everywhere, in hotels, cafes, the airport, always using her words to cross boundaries, to survive, to stand tall in a city that rarely looked twice at a girl like her. Tonight, in that glittering restaurant on Victoria Island, Amara stood taller than she ever had before. Her mother's spirit hovered behind her, urging her on, proud but watchful. As Khalid launched another question in yet another language, Amara felt the old rhythm steady her nerves. Her feet moved lightly over the tiled floor, her words flowing smooth and clear. Even as the stakes soared and the crowd pressed in, she never lost sight of the little girl in Surulere, dreaming by candlelight, hungry for a world beyond what anyone imagined for her. Baba Oho, catching the far-off look in her eyes, lifted his glass in silent salute. Chika, watching her from across the room, recognized the stubborn tilt of her chin and felt a rush of pride for the sister who had always been just a step ahead. Khalid watched Amara closely, his curiosity blooming into admiration. He wondered at the strength it took for someone so young, so small in stature, to meet him challenge for challenge. As Amara answered him again, their eyes met, and for a moment the whole room faded, leaving only two souls who understood what it meant to be shaped by loss, fueled by promises and carried by the hopes of mothers who taught their children that words, when wielded with love and courage, could remake the world. The applause had died down, the food was growing cold, but nobody seemed to care. The only thing that mattered now was whether Amara could keep up the impossible dance her mother had started so many years ago. The old lessons, the late-night games, the whispered encouragement in a language only the two of them shared, all of it had led to this night, to this moment, to this wager that would change everything. Oh, ChatGPT dice. The cheers faded, but the air stayed electric, charged with something nobody in the restaurant could name. Khalid, who had started the night with the swagger of a man untouchable, now sat straighter, a glint in his eyes as if he'd stumbled onto a puzzle worth his time. He no longer looked at Amara as if she were just another Lagos waitress. He studied her like a rare book in a language only he and a chosen few could read. He tested her, switching from one tongue to another, but Amara kept matching him word for word, her voice steady as iron beneath velvet. People gathered at the edges of the restaurant now, abandoning their own meals for the theater unfolding at Khalid's table. Damilola found herself fielding calls from regulars who had caught wind of the spectacle and wanted to reserve a front-row seat. Baba Oho, ever the silent observer, exchanged knowing glances with the old women clustered at the bar, their laughter soft but sharp as pepper. Khalid tried a new tactic, asking for a complicated Persian rice dish he doubted the kitchen could even pronounce, let alone make. Amara, unfazed, politely excused herself, slipped into the kitchen, and in crisp Farsi explained the request to the line cooks, who stared at her as if she had grown a second head. When she returned, tray in hand, the look on Khalid's face was worth 1,000 nights in a palace. He tasted the food, and for the first time, found himself at a loss for words. The guests, sensing a shift, erupted into applause once more. The tension between challenger and challenged began to twist into something else, something more playful. Khalid grinned, a little wild now, and called out to Amara in Yoruba, the tone teasing, trying to catch her off guard on home turf. Amara responded in flawless Yoruba, giving him a proverb that had the entire kitchen staff whooping. Chika, who had been lingering by the doorway, broke into a smile so wide it made Damilola's heart ache with relief. The energy in the room turned from tense to giddy, the kind of joy that only Lagos nights can bring. A group of young men near the window started making bets with each other on what language would be next, shouting suggestions in pidgin and laughing until they cried. Even the security guards, who never let their stoic masks slip, exchanged whispered wagers. The waitstaff, usually invisible, found themselves celebrated, pulled into the light by Amara's confidence. Damilola noticed that the guests who had once eyed Amara with skepticism now watched her as if she were a legend unfolding before their eyes. Khalid leaned back, his posture less rigid, his eyes shining with the kind of respect that money can't buy. He told her a story in Spanish about a business deal gone sideways in Barcelona, tossing in slang that would trip up any non-native. Amara replied in the same language, sharing her own tale about a Spanish tourist lost in Yaba market and how she'd helped him find his way for the price of a cold bottle of malt. The table erupted in laughter, the sound rich and unforced. Even Khalid joined in, his laugh booming, his face transformed. It was no longer a contest, but a celebration, a rare moment when pride gave way to camaraderie. The rivalry had become a dance, each one testing and teaching the other in turn. Amara saw the change in Khalid, the way his voice softened, the way his challenges lost their bite. For a moment he looked every bit the man who had once been a boy, dreaming beneath the endless Arabian sky, before money and power made the world smaller. He leaned in and whispered to her in Arabic, his words gentle, his tone curious. Amara smiled, the gap between them shrinking as language became a bridge instead of a wall. The other guests picked up on the shift, and their conversations grew louder, warmer, as if the whole room had been waiting for permission to let go. Damilola wiped a tear from her eye, grateful that her restaurant had become the heart of Lagos for just one night. She slipped over to Baba Ojo, who handed her a glass without a word. They clinked drinks and shared a silent toast to the girl who had brought so many people together. Chica finally approached his sister's table, clapping her on the back and whispering, "Now you be the real Lagos superstar." Amara grinned, her confidence swelling, but she stayed humble, never forgetting the promise she made to her mother on that dark night so many years ago. Outside, the traffic still hummed, Lagos never sleeping, but inside those walls time seemed to slow, stretching out the joy as long as it could last. Even Khalid, who had entered with the expectation of conquering, seemed changed. He stood and raised his glass to Amara and to the room, declaring in a mix of Arabic and pidgin, "Tonight, we all win." The crowd roared their approval, and for once, it didn't matter how much money was on the table. What mattered was that, in this city built on hustle and heart, a girl from Surulere had turned the tables on a sheik and reminded everyone that Lagos always finds a way to surprise you. The laughter had barely faded when Khalid's face shifted, the grin replaced by something more serious, more searching. For the first time all night, his bravado slipped. He leaned forward, lowering his voice so only Amara could hear. "Tell me, Amara, who are you really? What brought you here to this life?" His accent softened on her name, the way a man says a word he wants to remember. For a heartbeat, she considered brushing him off, keeping her answers as polished and distant as the silverware gleaming on his table. But something about his tone, the genuine curiosity threading through his question, made her pause. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her tray as she looked at him, measuring the weight of her own story against the night. She thought of her mother, of promises made and kept, of Surulere nights and whispered lessons in the dark. She looked up, her eyes bright but steady. People see Lagos and think they know it. They see the hustle, the chaos, the shine. But Lagos isn't a place you just pass through. Lagos tests you. It makes you show up every single day. My mother, she was the one who made me who I am. She gave me every word I needed, every lesson I couldn't get in school. When she died, all I had left was her voice, and I promised to use it, no matter where it took me. Her answer wasn't rehearsed. It was carved out of years of living with less, of fighting to be seen. She didn't tell him about every hunger pang, every time she'd watched dreams fade for lack of money. She didn't have to. Khalid heard it anyway. the shape of her struggle etched into every word. He let out a long breath, the sound almost lost under the growing hum of the restaurant. The world outside seemed impossibly far away. No traffic, no blaring horns, just the soft clink of glass and the electricity of two people finally seeing each other. Khalid glanced down at his hands, the gold and jewels suddenly heavy. Back home, I was always told to hide my weakness, to be strong, to win at any cost. Sometimes I think I've won so much that I forgot why I started fighting. His voice cracked at the edges, but he didn't flinch from it. Amara watched him, surprised at how human he looked, stripped of all the money and power, just another soul wrestling with the same old fears. The conversation between them took on a new shape, softer but sharper too, each question peeling back another layer. Khalid asked her about Surulere, about the market days and the rainy season, about how she learned so many languages. Amara answered, never once playing up her pain or hiding her pride. She spoke of neighbors who treated her like their own, of old men who taught her Russian swear words, and market women who showed her how to bargain in Hausa. She described her first day working at the restaurant, the way Damilola welcomed her like family, the comfort of kitchen laughter and shared bowls of jollof late at night. As they spoke, the other guests faded into the background. Even Damilola kept her distance, watching from across the room, sensing the importance of the moment. Baba Ojo cleaned glasses in slow circles, pretending not to listen, but missing nothing. Chica drifted closer, arms folded, face a mix of pride and worry. The energy in the restaurant was quieter now, more intimate, as if everyone had agreed to give space for this honest exchange. Khalid's questions kept coming, but the arrogance was gone, replaced by respect and curiosity. He wanted to know what kept Amara going when life pushed her down, what made her get up in the morning, why she never seemed to run out of hope. She laughed softly, shaking her head. Hope? Sometimes hope feels like a luxury. But Lagos teaches you to get up even when you're tired, to find another way, to believe that tomorrow could be the day you break through. That's what my mother gave me, and my brother Chica too. Family is everything. Khalid listened, truly listened, and for a while he stopped being the sheik with deep pockets and became just a man, a son, someone far from home but looking for connection. He told her, haltingly at first, about his own childhood in Abu Dhabi, about a mother who demanded excellence, who taught him that the world would try to shrink him, that he must never shrink himself. But power has a price, he admitted, and sometimes you pay it with your heart. Amara understood more than she let on. She knew what it was to carry expectations heavier than gold, to wear a brave face for people who needed you, to be unbreakable. Their conversation lingered in the air, changing the feeling of the night. The room buzzed with the low, gentle hum of Lagos at rest. Khalid finally smiled again, but this time the smile was softer, a silent thank you. You're not like anyone I've ever met, he said quietly. Amara lifted her chin, meeting his gaze. Neither are you, Khalid. You just forgot for a while. Around them the restaurant glowed, not with luxury or spectacle, but with the rare warmth of understanding. The city outside kept moving, but inside, for a precious moment, two lives, so different, so distant, sat at the same table, joined by the stubborn, beautiful force that keeps Lagos alive. The room had grown hushed, a gentle lull in the music and chatter, as if everyone sensed the fragile peace between Amara and Khalid. Two warriors finally lowering their shields. Chica, hovering by the kitchen door, shot glances at his sister, uncertain whether to interrupt. He could feel something shifting in the air, a tension breaking, something raw and true rising to the surface. Damilola, always alert, noticed too, but for once she let the moment breathe, quietly instructing her staff to hold the next course, to let the night play out its own rhythm. Khalid ran his thumb across the rim of his glass, lost in thought, the bright sparkle of diamonds suddenly dull in the soft candlelight. He looked up at Amara, a flicker of shame in his eyes, and began to speak, his words slow, deliberate. You know, When I walked in here tonight, I thought I could buy respect. I thought I could buy anything, really. That's how it always worked before. Throw enough money on the table. Watch people scramble. It's easy to forget who you are when everyone's busy telling you what you want to hear. He paused, his voice catching, the mask of certainty slipping away. But tonight, you made me remember something I haven't felt in years, that there are things money can't buy, that sometimes you lose, and you have to accept it. Amara listened, her face open, unguarded. She knew about pride, about losing it, about holding on to it for too long. She offered no judgment, only patience. My mother used to say, "Pride is like salt," she said, her words soft. "Just enough makes the meal. Too much ruins it." Khalid's mouth twisted into a half smile. Your mother was a wise woman. Silence stretched between them, the comfortable kind, like an old song humming in the background. Suddenly, Sheik could take it no longer. He strode across the restaurant, shoulders tense, voice low but urgent. "Amara, are you okay? This man, he hasn't troubled you, right?" He glared at Khalid, daring him to answer. Amara smiled, placing a gentle hand on her brother's arm. "I'm fine, Sheik. No one here is troubling me." Khalid looked at the siblings, the fierce loyalty shining between them. "You have a good family," he said, sincerity ringing out in every syllable. "You should hold on to that." Sheik hesitated, his chest puffed with both protectiveness and pride. "My sister doesn't back down for anyone," he said, voice loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. Baba Ojo chuckled from his spot at the bar, raising his glass in salute. "That one? She's Lagos born and bred. Tougher than a Danfo driver in rush hour." The room erupted in laughter, the tension fully dissolved, everyone relaxing into a new sense of camaraderie. Amara shook her head, smiling, grateful for the circle that always seemed to form around her, no matter where she went. Khalid, buoyed by the honesty around him, leaned in once more. "Let me tell you something I've never said out loud in a room full of strangers. I wasn't always like this. There was a time when I had nothing, before the oil, before the deals, before Abu Dhabi or Dubai. Just a boy with a mother who believed in him, who pushed him, who made him believe he could be more. I lost her too. After that, I thought, if I could build enough, earn enough, I'd never feel that emptiness again. I was wrong." His voice was steady, but his eyes were glossy, searching for understanding, forgiveness, maybe even a sense of belonging he hadn't realized he craved. Amara understood. She saw herself in his longing, the ache of dreams chased and missed. "Sometimes we work so hard to fill the spaces left behind, we forget what really fits there," she said. Her voice was gentle, but there was iron underneath. Khalid nodded, the two of them sitting quietly with their pain, letting it settle and soften. Around them, the guests sensed the change, the air thick with empathy, a kind of silent applause for courage that didn't always roar. Damilola gave her staff the nod to resume service, but did so quietly, respecting the tenderness of what had passed between Amara and Khalid. Baba Ojo, always the old soul, muttered to no one in particular, "Some wounds only Lagos nights can heal." Plates clinked, laughter trickled back, but something essential had shifted. The contest was over, and in its place was an unspoken pact of respect. As dessert was served, Khalid pushed his untouched plate aside and stood up, gathering the attention of the entire room with a single gesture. "Tonight, I came here expecting to win, but it was I who learned a lesson. I want everyone to know the wager is over. Amara, you've more than earned what I promised, but even more, you've earned my respect." The applause was thunderous, not just for the money, but for the truth that had been spoken aloud, rare as gold in any city, rarer still in Lagos. Khalid turned to Sheik and bowed his head, a gesture of peace. Sheik, still wary but moved by the humility, nodded back. Amara looked at her brother, then at Khalid, a quiet pride blooming in her chest. The crowd cheered, raising their glasses, celebrating a night where hearts had been laid bare and old wounds seen for what they were. Not weaknesses, but proof that even the strongest among them still needed grace. The lights burned a little warmer, The city outside just a touch softer, as if Lagos itself was exhaling after a long, hard day. Khalid's words hung in the air like a blessing, the room pulsing with the kind of joy that's born only when people witness something real. There was no need for grand gestures now. Amara stood at the center of it all, her chest rising with each steady breath, her eyes bright with the glow of being truly seen. Baba Ojo slid around the bar and offered her a wink as if to say, "You've changed this place tonight." Damilola, normally a blur of efficiency, stopped moving, her hand pressed over her heart, letting the pride wash over her. The guests, who had come for an ordinary meal, now found themselves swept into something richer, a feeling that would stay with them long after the taste of dessert had faded. Khalid motioned to one of his bodyguards, who stepped forward with a sleek silver briefcase that looked wildly out of place against the battered tiles of the restaurant floor. With a soft click, he opened it, revealing neat stacks of crisp $100 bills. The sight pulled a gasp from the crowd. It wasn't just the money, though, that was enough to buy a small house in Lekki. It was the gesture, the promise honored, the respect made tangible. Khalid picked up a single stack and handed it directly to Amara. She took it, her hands steady, her gratitude silent but overflowing. Khalid looked her in the eye, not as a conqueror, but as a man who had finally let go of a burden. "You kept your word," he said quietly, "and so will I." Chica, pride written all over his face, clapped his sister on the shoulder. "We go chop better food tonight," he crowed, making half the room burst out laughing. Amara grinned at him, her love for her brother so open and fierce that for a moment even Khalid's hard edges softened. Damilola stepped forward, hugging Amara tightly. "You've done us proud, girl. This restaurant will never be the same." The waiters gathered around, all wanting to share the moment, shaking Amara's hand, patting her back, letting her know she'd given them something to believe in. Baba Ojo poured a glass of palm wine for her, pressing it into her hand with a fatherly squeeze. "No, your night, my Pekin. Drink small for your mama's spirit." Even the guests who'd only come for gossip found themselves raising their glasses. Old rivalries and social boundaries fell away, replaced by laughter and easy conversation. Khalid remained at the table, his posture relaxed for the first time, as if something heavy had finally been set down. He spoke quietly with Amara, asking if she'd ever dreamed of traveling, what places she'd want to see. She smiled and told him, "Everywhere, but Lagos will always be home." Damilola called for a toast, and the restaurant responded in kind. Glasses clinked, the music grew louder, and for a few golden minutes, nobody thought about bills or burdens or the long road home. Chica regaled the kitchen with the story of his sister's victory, embellishing it until even Baba Ojo was shaking his head in mock disbelief. Amara let herself bask in the warmth, her promise to her mother humming beneath her skin, a quiet thread connecting her to all the women who'd come before. As the night deepened, the briefcase was quietly tucked away, but the memory of the wager lingered, sparkling in the eyes of everyone who had witnessed it. Khalid prepared to leave, his entourage gathering near the door. He paused before stepping out, turning back to Amara. "You've got something rare," he said. "Don't ever let anyone talk you out of it." She nodded, the weight of the night settling softly on her shoulders, no longer a burden, but a kind of armor. Khalid's last glance was not of a man bested, but of someone who'd found peace in losing to the right opponent. The city outside still roared, okadas buzzing past, street hawkers calling, 1,000 stories weaving through the humid night. But inside the restaurant, the world was soft, golden, a little bit changed. Damilola watched Amara and Chica gather their things, ready to step out into the swirl of Lagos. The staff clapped for her as she passed, and one of the younger waiters slipped her a folded note, just a thank you, nothing more. But Amara tucked it into her pocket with the stack of bills, a small secret to savor on the long ride home. Baba Ojo lingered by the door, giving Amara a fatherly pat on the back as she and Chica headed out. "Lagos will remember you," he whispered. Amara just smiled, her eyes shining. Out on the street, Chika flagged down a keke, and the two of them climbed in, the city's chaos swirling around them like a familiar song. Amara rested her head on her brother's shoulder, the briefcase clutched tight, the cool night air washing over her face. For the first time in a long time, the future felt wide open, every road shining with possibility. Behind them, the restaurant glowed with light and laughter, a small beacon in the heart of the city, proof that sometimes, in Lagos, courage can turn an ordinary night into legend. Under the sodium orange glow of streetlights, Amara and Chika slipped out of the restaurant, the laughter and applause fading behind them as the door swung shut. The city night pressed close, Lagos never truly sleeping, just shifting its pulse from work to wonder. Amara tucked the silver briefcase under her arm, its weight somehow less than she'd imagined. For a few steps, neither spoke. The air was thick with the scent of roasted corn and the hiss of frying plantain from a roadside vendor, mixing with the exhaust of Okadas zipping past. Chika walked just half a step ahead, casting glances over his shoulder every so often, the protective big brother to the end. They crossed the road near the old yellow Danfo stop, dodging a splash of gutter water as a cab swung too close. Amara burst out laughing, that bright, easy sound that had always belonged to her, the kind that made strangers turn their heads and smile. Chika grinned, shaking his head. So na so Lagos be. 1 minute you dey chop with Sheik, next minute you dey dodge Danfo splash. Amara nudged him playfully, her nerves finally unwinding. You worry too much, Chika. Tonight, we are not running from anything. We're walking into something new. The city was alive, even in these small hours. Tailors packing up their stalls, lovers huddled beneath faded umbrellas, an old security guard dozing on a wooden chair. Amara felt the eyes of her city on her, curious, proud, a little envious maybe, but never malicious. She'd spent her whole life weaving through these streets, watching the city shift and stretch, learning the rhythm of Lagos like a second heartbeat. Tonight, the rhythm was hers. They paused at a suya spot where the vendor, a toothless man with a bright scarf, recognized Chika. Ah, my guy, who dey make you smile like this? Chika thumped the man on the back and gestured to his sister. Na my sister, oh! She win big tonight. Millionaire challenge. The vendor's eyes widened. You know they joke. Amara, you go buy suya for all of us tonight. Amara laughed and did just that, trading a stack of crisp naira notes for a paper cone loaded with hot, spicy meat. They shared it on the curb, licking grease from their fingers, the briefcase sitting between them like another old friend. After a while, Chika grew quiet, his gaze drifting to the sky, where stars peeked through a gap in the city's smog. Mama go dey proud, you know. Amara nodded, feeling her mother's presence as real as the night around them. She could almost hear Ngozi's voice, gentle, fierce, unyielding, pushing her forward, telling her to take up space, to answer the world in any language it threw at her. Amara took a breath, the weight of the promise she'd kept settling softly over her heart, not heavy now, but grounding, steadying. We did it, Chika, and we did it our way. A few passers-by called out congratulations, word of her triumph having spread faster than the city's traffic. Even a Kiki driver slowed down to salute her, the city's signature blend of respect and playfulness. She waved back, cheeks aching from smiling. They continued their slow walk home, letting the night stretch as long as possible, savoring the strangeness of it all. A girl who'd grown up translating the world in a cramped flat, now holding a briefcase full of possibility. At their block, a group of kids played football by moonlight, their laughter pealing through the dark. Amara paused, watching them, her memories folding in on themselves. Old games, old dreams. Her mother clapping from the doorway, promising that someday the world would be bigger than Surulere. She reached out and ruffled one boy's hair as they passed, sharing a smile only he could see. Inside the building, everything was as it always had been, the peeling paint, the sleepy landlord's dog barking from behind a gate, the long climb up the stairs. But it felt different now. Each step was lighter, every sound softer, as if the world itself had shifted, if only by a few degrees. Chica unlocked the door and ushered Amara in, flicking on the lights with a flourish. For a moment, neither of them moved. The city's noise buzzed beneath their window, life rolling on, indifferent and infinite. Amara set the briefcase down on the old dining table, the same one that had once held nothing but hope and stories. She looked at her brother, at their worn-out chairs and the chipped teapot her mother had loved, and felt a peace she hadn't known she was missing. Chica poured them both a cup of tea, the ritual steadying and sweet. "What next?" he asked, the question simple but full of 1,000 possible roads. Amara smiled into her cup, thinking of Khalid's last words, the encouragement in Damilola's hug, the applause that had carried her through the evening. "Next," she said, her voice strong and light. "Anything, everything." The city outside kept moving, sirens wailing, night hawkers calling, a taxi horn blaring somewhere down the street. But inside that little flat, time paused. Amara and Chica sat side by side, hands wrapped around chipped mugs, dreams suddenly bigger than the room could hold. Out there, Lagos stretched toward morning, the briefcase waiting quietly on the table, a promise kept, a future unwritten, and the girl who had answered the world in 5 languages finally finding her own. If you enjoyed this journey through Lagos tonight and want to discover more stories that prove courage and heart can change everything, don't forget to subscribe and join our family. Every week a new tale, maybe yours next. Hit that button and let's make history together.